I really like this word in the Psalms. Psalm 25, he said, Lord, show me your ways, teach me your paths, lead me in your truth, and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. And further on it goes down and says, all the paths of the Lord are mercy and truth to such as keep his commandments and keep his testimonies. A lot of people want the word and they jump up and down, they get all excited about it, but when they realize the responsibility of keeping his word, there's a demand there. Hey, thanks for being here today. I'm delighted to see you, and we're going to do our best to stay on top of these words for you and speak encouragement to you. We are meeting on Sunday mornings. There's room. There's plenty of room there, and there's for distance, and 3 places in the building where you come get your hands clean and just come in and join the praise and the worship. You know, I think I'm going to talk about it in the next time that I come with you. I'm going to talk about what has been taken away from us by the snatching away of the community that we have, and what happens in the community, and why we need the community of the Word and the worship. And I really applauded. There was a church, and not sure where it was, but I saw somebody sent me the video of it. It was on social media, and so they couldn't meet at their church, so they all met at the Walmart. And all of a sudden they started singing, and the harmony was beautiful and great. Well, I'm not beyond trying something like that. You never know. Keep an eye. But we've lost that community, that feel thing there. And when you take a smile away from somebody, and you take away a touch away from somebody, you're robbing them of something they were created to. In fact, there's something inside of us that want to see that. And we had a last Sunday morning we were doing something. I said, well, instead of greeting somebody, I want you to wave and let me see your teeth for just a minute. And we did that, and we've lost a lot of those things, and I won't go into all the whys and the wherefores there, and I'm not going to burden you with some of those things. And I realize that some of you are very strong in your opinions on different ways there. But I think that's the way things ought to be, that people ought to be able to express themselves. So you come and join us, and it's a no condemnation meeting, and I think that's pretty revolutionary for church, you know what I mean? So join us, and it'll be a good time. You know, when the year turned and the brand new year started, and everybody was giving their words, we're going to have 2020 vision, and they're giving all their little slogans and all that exciting. Well, that crashed and burned pretty fast. We opened up with the word, and I just felt at the beginning of the year to start at the beginning. And we opened up to page 1, in the beginning, God. And then God created. And we spent about 5 weeks going through Genesis, and we spent a lot of time on Joseph. You know, one of the things that it seems the Joseph story was so interesting too, is dealing with undeserved tragedy. Walking through undeserved tragedy. We've been raised with the mindset, you do this and you're going to be in trouble, you'll reap what you sow. That's real true. That's what I just read a minute ago. Those things that the Lord gives, that is toward those who will keep his commandments and who love him. But there's sometimes we find ourselves in something we did not create, undeserved tragedy. And it's then that we have to know what we believe in and why we're doing what we're doing. So I've come to encourage you today. Well, we barely got to the end of Genesis. And I said, well, what are we going to do? And I just turned the next page, and we started with Exodus. Well, when I began to kind of frame it out, I knew it was going to take about 10 weeks, 10 different messages, and I just kind of went with it as it was. And you know the story by now. The week that the plagues we're going to talk about the plagues on the children of Israel, the week those showed up, we had to dismiss service because of a plague. Well, finally we got through all of that when we came back, and I think it's taken about 4.5 to 5 months to get a 10-part series of that, because I did other things in the meantime, and there were pressing issues I think we needed to address. But today I want to go back to near the end of my whole Exodus story that we've not had available on video for you today, and I want to talk about human nature. We love God, we rejoice, we want God's blessings, but the first time things are getting a little thin, and maybe we don't think we can hear his voice and he's not listening or whatever, it's amazing how many times people will revert to that setting, like with the computers. You can press that button to go back to the original settings there. And a lot of times we do that in our lives because we don't feel we've heard something. But the reason why we gather, the reason why we read the Word, is that we will avoid those kinds of mindsets that take us back to a reset. We need to be reset in the Word. And we're going to talk about the children of Israel. God did so many things for them. He blessed them. It was a miraculous deliverance right in front of their eyes. They saw it, they experienced it, but boy, when things got a little rough, well, let's just talk about it right now. You know, when I talked about the commandments, and we've already done that on video, And we talked about the 10 Commandments, and we did it, actually the 10 statements from God, and we did it. But during the reading today, you're going to see some unusual, fun dialogue between God and between Moses. I don't know about you, but I've had dialogue with God. Maybe I haven't heard a thundering back to me, but there's been a back and forth, especially during these months, during these times. Here's one thing we learn when we watch Israel, though, when we read the story about them, especially in the book of Exodus and getting near the end of Exodus. Every time the group of Israelites lost their passion for righteousness. Remember what I read a minute ago in the Psalm? Those who will pursue these things, those who will keep these statutes, those are the people that God will live with, that God will bless. Every time that they went back and served their own flesh passion, every time they lost their passion for righteousness, they ended back up in some kind of bondage. You know, when you read the scripture, God did great things. The deliverance was miraculous by itself. Watching the 10 plagues was miraculous. Well, when the horn blew and they left town, and they have all the back wages and all the gold from Egypt, and they get to the Red Sea, you know that story, and you know what happened when Charlton Heston raised both of his hands, and that thing opened up. They walked over on dry ground. By the way, the movie's not quite right. The movie, they're helping old people through there. The word said there wasn't a feeble one among them. Nobody was crippled. Nobody was lame. Nobody needed it. It wasn't a feeble one among them. And they went to the other side. Boy, that's great, great. And all of a sudden, they heard that boogity boogity in the background. And they look around, and the army is coming after them. And there they are. And what are we going to do now, God? What are we going to do now, Moses? Well, you know that story. That thing closed, and they were gone immediately. Well, you know the great story, Exodus 15. You know, Moses, in the transcription of it, they didn't even wait to a new chapter. It's kind of fun. They come out of the water and they're singing, I will sing unto the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously, the horse and rider thrown into the sea. Oh, we've sung that, we've danced, and we've swayed, and we laughed at that. Well, they did the same thing. And just moments after that, in the very next verse of the next chapter, they find themselves in a place where there is a problem, and it's not quite as encouraging, and they're thirsty and they're dry. And the word says they started murmuring. Now, before we do anything else, let's talk about the spirit of murmuring. How many of you know professional murmurers? I think we all do. There are some people that think they're here on the planet to correct you and to make sure you're in line. And, you know, there's just some people, they're just miserable unless they can find something to complain about. And we all know complainers. And I just, you know, I avoid those kind of people. I will smile at them. I'll pray for them. I just don't want to eat Christmas dinner with them. I don't want to take a vacation with them. I don't want to hear murmuring. I don't want to hear complaining. And none of us do. And it is incumbent upon us that a good word comes out of our mouth. So it says they started murmuring. And then they started contending with Moses in the next chapter, back and forth. Well, when I looked a little deeper into this word, murmuring, and maybe people have been tempted to murmur during this crazy, in fact, some of this is demonic thing going on right now. Well, the word, when you look at the word murmur, it doesn't just mean complaining. You know, you think like a kid, he's kind of crying, I'm tired, and he's murmuring, I'm hungry, or like that. But when you look down in the tear down deepness of that word there, it doesn't mean just a frown on your face and you're disappointed. Actually, it says here, murmur is a malicious whispering of slander. So when they came against Moses and they began to say certain things, they were coming against Moses because they wanted to fuss at God at the same time. And they begin to murmur. Well, I want to encourage you, if you have a gift of murmuring, knock it off. You're not fun to be with. You know, murmuring is it's a little crude, but why not tell you anyway? I heard somebody say one time, murmuring and complaining is like throwing up. You're the only one that feels better, and you get everybody else sick watching it. So I just want to encourage you, stop murmuring. God's good. God's good. Stop murmuring. Don't complain. But they were doing it because it was against God, and it was going after God. And later on in the scriptures, when we see the word murmuring, it's used, actually some of the Pharisees, in the complaining, the way they complained, it was a slander, malicious, even a gossip thing into it right now. Well, so here they are. And in chapter 3, First off, they find themselves at Sinai again. Sinai, where did we hear about that? Exodus 3. Here's Moses one day. He's out keeping the flock of Jethro, and that was a part of that. That was one 40-year segment of his life, and he was serving Jethro, who was of the house of Bodine, for those of you who are keeping score right there. He's serving Jethro, and he's at Sinai, and all of a sudden he sees this bush, and it's on fire. And, well, you know the story. He said, take your shoes off, son. You're on holy ground. That bush was on fire, but it was not being consumed. And from that point, God gave him the marching orders. He gave them the word. And I think that is really a neat thing. But that wasn't the only time he was going to be at that spot. That's what's way cool about this. You move forward, that was chapter 3. You move to chapter 19 in Exodus, and it says, even the 3rd month after the children of Israel had gone out the land of Egypt, they came to the wilderness of Sinai. That's where they were. And actually, they had been in that area and they had been told to sanctify themselves. And here they are. And it says they went there, and the Lord called him from the mountain. What mountain? The Mount Sinai. Well, he knows the territory. It's there. He goes up. He begins to talk to God. And in chapter 24 of Exodus, it says, the glory of God rested on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for 6 days. On the 7th day, God called Moses out of the midst of the cloud. The sight of the glory of the Lord was like a consuming fire. The top of the mountain in the eyes of the children of Israel as they looked. I mean, it must have been an awesome sight. Here, they were witnessing something. They were witnessing something. They had witnessed great things. They had food from the sky. They had water from a rock. They had cloud covering them in the heat and fire. And they had seen so many good things of God. Well, verse 18. Moses goes to the midst of the cloud, went up into the mountain. Moses was in the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. Boy, you could do a lot on the 40 days and 40 nights. I won't do it today, maybe at another time. You know, the matter of fact, the first time we heard about the top 10, now here he is further down, but we first heard about the top 10 in chapter 20 of Exodus. But a lot has been going on there. God is downloading a lot of things to him in the meantime. So in chapter 31, verse 18, it said, when he had made the end of his speaking to him on Sinai, talking about God to Moses, he gave them 2 tablets of testimony, the tablets of stone, written by the finger of God. He is so excited. He's worked up. I mean, he has been visiting God. It is a wonderful time, and it's time to take a quick sip. How many of you could use a New Orleans snowball right now? What flavor do you like the best? Tyler likes the cherry. Linda likes the folded snowballs, you know, with the ice cream in it. Don't tell her I told you. But I like some of the fun flavors. When we were kids, we would get those bubble gums and the spearmints and turn our tongues blue and green and things like that and mix it. And maybe if the children of Israel had a snowball stand, they could have coped with the 40 days and 40 nights. So he's coming down the mountain. He's been with God. Have you ever had a meeting with God? A time where you know God had been real to you, and as you come back down into something, you got some murmuring, you got some clamoring, you got junk you got to deal with. Well, that's what happened to him. He's got plans. God had written this thing with his finger. He's given him orders. He's excited. Well, in the meantime, before he actually comes down, the people saw that Moses had been delayed from coming down the mountain. So they grabbed Aaron and they said, come, let us make us gods that we can worship with him. As far as Moses, this man, they acted like they didn't know who he was. Moses, this man, you know, almost like they met on the street. This was the deliverer who spoke to them. But here they are. They've gone a few days. They've not heard bells and whistles, and they've gone through a difficult. They can look and see God as somewhere. This man, Moses, a little bit of derision wrapped in that. It is amazing the carnal detachment that people get. People that know God, people that have worshiped God, that have served God, but something goes not quite right in this detachment, well, this God thing, so to speak. And he said, this guy who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what's become of this guy. Well, here's Aaron, and he's feeling the press from all sides there, and he's crumbling under the pressure. So he said, tell you what, guys, break off your earrings. Give us the earrings and your jewelry from your wives, your sons, your daughters. The people broke off all the gold. They brought it to Aaron. He received the gold from their hand. He fashioned it with an engraving tool. Now that gold had been given to them because God said it was theirs. God gave that to him. That was precious. God had given it to him. And he said when he took it, he said he made a tool, an engraving tool, and he molded the calf. You understand what's going to happen here in just a minute. And he said, "This is your God, O Israel. This is the God that brought you out of the land of Egypt." How many times, I've seen it, but how many times have we know, if we're real honest, we're only breathing because of the goodness of God. I like the Lamentations word that says, if it wasn't for the Lord's mercies, we would all be consumed. We'd all be destroyed. How many times have we been that way? And we forget, well, God, you haven't done anything. Open your eyes, you're still here. Do the comparison of your walk compared to people maybe that you walked with as a kid or a young person or even a church person of many years ago. And you can't give up on the word. You can't give up on the worship. He said, "This is your God." Well, here's what we've learned at this point. It really was easier to get the children of Israel out of Egypt than to get Egypt out of the children of Israel. Does that make sense to you? It was easier bodily to get them out and to remove them from that place of bondage than it was to get that thing out of them. That thing is something we all fight. It may not be Egypt, but there are times that we lapse. People say, "What happened? I was doing good and I went back. I looked back." Well, you're not going to be blessed if you look back, and a lot of times it's a lot harder to even pull out of those things. And boy, you need miracles from God. So I've come to encourage you today. Well, this thing, here they are. They've been delivered. They had been slaves for all these years. They had been beat, they had been harassed, they had been abused. But carnal mind, they went back to the settings that they came with, and it was against God. Aaron saw it, he built an altar, and he said, "Tomorrow you're going to have a big party, we're going to bring it." And the word actually says the people sat down to eat and drink, and they rose up to play. Let me just lovingly say, those are gentle words. Those are soft words for what was really going on. When they rose to play, you're not talking horseshoes, you're not talking volleyball. Someone said one time, no, it's more like drunk twister that was going on there. It was a mess. It was a mess. And the trip from idol worship to debauchery is always a quick one. They worshiped that idol, and the next step, they went into debauchery when they gave themselves. When you break away intentionally from the blessings of God, you got a problem there. And they broke away. And this was so important. Why was this important? This episode is so important that it's not just something that happened. Fast forward, New Testament, Acts chapter 7. Stephen, you know the story. Most people only know about Stephen. Well, Stephen got stoned. Well, Stephen was preaching a message that was lighting a fire under him, and he got them all jazzed up. Well, here's Stephen in his preaching said this. He's talking about the Lord Jesus and what he did in the lives of people, even their ancestors. They knew the history. And he said, "This is he who was in the congregation in the wilderness with the angel who spoke to him," meaning Moses, on Mount Sinai. "And he spoke with our fathers, the one who received the living oracles to give us, whom our fathers would not obey, but they rejected the word. And in their hearts first, in their hearts they turned back to Egypt." They turned back to Egypt. "And they said to Aaron, 'Make us gods to go before us. As for Moses who brought us out of this land, we don't know what's become of him.'" This was such a big episode in Exodus. It had been taught, and the story had been handed down. Stephen is building a sermon around this rebellion, that when things are difficult, the first knee-jerk thing of a flesh man is to look back. Well, God's doing great things. Moses is having the time of his life. Chapter 32, verse 7. The Lord says to Moses, now this is really cool, y'all. This is fun. You know, people talk, well, you know, the Lord has stayed and stuff. No, I mean, the Lord speaks. The Lord is loving. He says to Moses, "Go, quick, get down there." Now watch what God says. He says, "For your people, whom you brought out of the land of Egypt, have corrupted themselves." God didn't want anything to do. He didn't want ownership with these people. They're ungrateful. "They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them. They made themselves a molded calf. They worshipped it and they sacrificed to it. And they said, 'This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt.'" Now just 5 months previous, They are dancing by the side of the Red Sea. God, you are wonderful. They said, my Father's God, and I will praise him. My Father's God, I will exalt him. And here they are. They have just been introduced to just a concept of what God has done, and they have already violated 1 and 2 of the commandments. In fact, the first one and the second commandment. I mean, Moses isn't even down yet, and they violated no other gods before me. They violated, you shall not make any graven image that you would bow down to and worship. They had already disrespected the first and the second commandment. It was deliberate. It was rebellious. It was willful. It was decided that's what they would do. And the Lord says to Moses, I've seen this people. They're a bunch of stiff-necked people. Stiff-neck is a cool word. Maybe your folks or your grandparents or the old timers, he's hard-headed. That boy's hard-headed. Well, God called him stiff-necked. That means that, they won't move. They're rigid. They're not paying attention. And God's still talking. He said, all right, now therefore, let me alone that my wrath may burn hot against them, that I may consume them. And I'm going to make of you a great nation. God's ticked off, and he's saying, look out, leave me alone. Let me have, kind of like Fred Sanford when he had enough of Aunt Esther, and he'd start swinging those arms like that. Esther, and they were going back and forth. I'm going to get, and never once did he get near enough to do it. Never once did he hit, but the threats were there, the flailing was there, and perhaps God was doing a little bit of this with Moses. And he said to him, you get away, I'm going to wipe them out. Well, role reversal. Moses then pleads with the Lord, his God, it says. That's in chapter 32, verse 11. And this is really cool. Now remember what God said about him? And he said, Lord, why does your wrath burn against your people? Nobody wanted them. Nobody wanted them. Nobody wanted ownership. They were ashamed of them, and they were tired of them. Nobody wanted them. But thank God they didn't get mad at the same time. They took turns. He said, these are your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt. You did these things. You brought them out with great power and with a mighty hand. And then he starts kind of talking to God and said, you need to think about this, God. Why should the Egyptians say this? He brought them out to harm them. He brought them out to kill them in the mountains, to consume them from the face of the earth. Turn from your fierce wrath and please relent this harm from your people. Nobody wants them. Nobody wants to claim them. He said, remember Abraham? Remember Isaac and Jacob? Remember the word that you even gave me on the mountain, your servants, and you swore to them, I will multiply your descendants. This land I'm going to give to you. You will inherit it. And he actually changed the Lord's mind. That's unusual, isn't it? Verse 14, the Lord relented from the harm which he said he was going to do to these people. So Moses immediately, he starts moving. He goes down the mountain, tablet under each of his hands. The tablets were written on both sides. On one side and on the other was written. Now the tablets were the work of God. This is big. His word, it's the work of God himself. And the writing was the writing of God engraved on the tablets. Well, as they're going down, Joshua's been with him, was waiting for him down a little ways. And Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted. And he said to Moses, there is a noise of war in the camp. And he said, it's not the noise or a shout of victory. It's not the cry of defeat, but it's the sound of singing I hear. Actually, one writer said it was like he was saying there's a sound of mischief down there. Probably sounded like Fat Tuesday on Canal Street or Bourbon Street. He said there's a sound of mischief down there. It's not the sound of praising people. Something is not right there. It was a rebellious sound. And by the way, the rejoicing of rebellious people sounds like war to God. And a rebellious people, it's I don't care I don't care how you code it or how you say it. It's rebellion against God. So it was as soon as he came near the camp, he saw the calf and he saw the dancing. Moses' anger became hot. He cast he just wasn't thinking. I gotta think the minute he threw that. Have you ever done something and the minute you do it, you saw it leaving your hand like that? I think Moses probably saw it leaving his hand there in the fit of rage there and knew it was too far gone. Well, you remember the story. He took it, he threw it down. He cast them down and broke them at the foot of the mountain Sinai, that place that he had been there 40 years before, they broke. And he took the calf which they made, he burned it with fire, he broke it up, he grounded it. Don't you know they stayed back when they saw his rage? This fellow was fit to be tied. He grabbed that thing and broke it apart and slammed it down on the ground and began to crush it up. And boy, you think it was bad if you got your mouth washed out with soap as a little kid. He took it there and he scattered it in the water and he made the children of Israel drink it. I got to say this, man. I don't think he said, drink this. No, I think he said, put your head down, drink this. Good, you want this? You want this, calf? You drink this. Come on. No, come on. No, drink it. You wanted this. You were worship. I think it was that kind of thing going on there. There was a holy, righteous indignation, and maybe a holy rage even going on right there. And Moses said to Aaron, all right, now come here, son. Why did you do this? Why did you do this? Why have you brought great sin upon these people? Again, he raises himself up as the leader, showing his human carnal nature. And Aaron said, don't let the anger, my Lord, become so hot. Please just calm down. You know these people, they are set on evil. You know they're nuts. You know you've lived with them over and over. They came to me and they said, let us make gods. Because Moses, he's brought us out of here, out of Egypt. He's left us here. We haven't seen him in 40 days. He's left us here to die. And I just said to them, whoever has any gold, let them break it off. So they gave it to me. I threw it into the fire, and this calf just came out. If you've ever raised a kid, if you ever raised a child and you come home and there's a mess, the kitchen's a mess or a room's a mess and they've been into something and there's food on the face or there are things on the floor, and we've all had those moments where we looked at them and said, what happened here? What did you do? And they look at you and they go, I don't know. Aaron did that. What have you done? He said, look, he said, I threw it in the fire. This calf came out. Nothing new under the sun in carnal man. 2nd chapter of the book. Who told you you were naked? Who told you to eat this? He said, that woman that you gave me. Aaron's doing the same trick right now. God's heard all the excuses. And when Moses saw the people were unrestrained, see, Aaron had not restrained them. He could have stopped that thing right there, but he succumbed to that pressure. You read really the story there. They were drunk and naked. The country preacher said, drunk and naked, that's a bad combination. And the leader had failed them, and God had been ticked off. Now Moses was fuming. You know, in our world today, the lack of restraint is the big problem. This is why we're seeing what we're seeing today. There's lack of restraint. The 2 tablets were going to deal with this concept, but it takes man to take the word and believe the word and to make it work in their lives. Restraint is cast off in a life when you lose the focus of hope, when you lose the focus of who you serve, when you lose the focus of who you love. The focus of who you love will help you behave yourself. The focus of your family, the focus of respect for other people's property. We've got so much lack of restraint right now. That's because people feel they've lost hope. Proverbs 29:18 says it this way, where there is no revelation or when there's no understanding and knowledge, it says people cast off restraint, but happy is he who keeps the law. The New American Standard says it this way, where there is no vision, the people are unrestrained. The NIV says where there's no revelation, people throw off restraint. The New Living Translation says when people do not accept divine guidance, they run wild. Lack of restraint. Verse 25, when Moses saw that the people were unrestrained, he knew there was a problem there. Why was God so adamant? Moses was adamant because he was just ticked off. He figured he had put his life on the line for these people and they were ungrateful. But I think God was adamant because man, his creation, Man is the only created being capable of having a personal relationship with him, to communicate with him. The rest of creation is told what they're going to do. And now man is messing this up. And as soon as they fix that car alarm, they got it. Exodus 32 said, so Moses stood in the entrance. By the way, there's only going to be one entrance. Oh, we'll just go anyway. No, there's only one entrance. To the word, to the worship, to salvation. Moses stood at the entrance of the camp. And he laid it down. It was a throwdown. It was a challenge. He said, whoever's on the Lord's side, come over here. And all the sons of Levi, all the worshipers, all the praisers together with him. And he said to them, thus says the Lord of Israel. And he tells them, according to the word of the Lord right now, he said, it's time to take care of these people that aren't on the Lord's side. And they cleaned house that day. He said, consecrate yourselves today for the Lord, that he may bestow a blessing on you this day. God was demanding cleanness. God was demanding devotion. God's man had taken an easy road before when he was left in charge. And now Moses, as God's man, he's not going to take the easy road. The question for me, the question for you today, I mean, they didn't even get grounded in all 10 of the statements of God, and they already violated 1 and 2 already. But the question is for all of us every day, are you on the Lord's side? We will have to stand in the middle of the crowd and the clamor, you know, like my buddies, the Gaither Vocal Band, they used to sing, he just needs a few good men. G.K. Chesterton was quite a character. He was a theologian and a commentator. He wrote this, it's not that we don't have enough scoundrels to curse, it's that we don't have enough good men to curse them. Curse them was the best way to say it. He needs a few good men that'll stand for his word and say, I'm on the Lord's side. It's getting tough today. Truth has been called a lie these days. Revelation has been called not truthful. Those things have been twisted. I'm going to address that in days to come. These crazy people, they had a history, and they sometimes did it in the same week. They praised God on one day and they'd curse him a day or two later. I want to encourage you, God's not looking for schizophrenic praise and worship. He's looking for people that will stand and be strong. T.D. Jakes said it this way one time. He said, we've got to decide, sometimes we're going to have to follow the Lord even when we can't hear him. Even when we can't see, we need to do what we know to do and follow the word. What was the problem with them? What's the problem today? Especially with the weariness that a lot of us are facing today. We grow weary in our walk. Other things take the space. We've been locked up. We've lost community. We've lost the together thing that we realize that we need so much, even if it is just a smile. They've even stopped you from smiling because they close your face. And at the same time, a mask is also something that cowards hide behind, that criminals hide behind. And a lot of kids, if they took their mask off, they'd be back in the basement with their PlayStations. So let us walk before God and let nothing else take the space. Children of Israel were ticked off for a while and they got a little antsy and they let something else take the space of God. This is why we need the commandments. This is why we need the word, and we cannot lose sight of who Jesus is. You see, a few chapters back, like the 24th chapter, it said Aaron actually saw God. He saw God. I've had people say, "Oh, I love God," and then I wonder, well, how did they end up like this? He saw God, it said in 24, but in chapter 32, he made the golden calf. And we can be so near to God, and we lose this urgency. Something else takes its place when we're weary and we're tired. The great preacher Ian Bound said, "Sinning men stop praying, and praying men stop sinning." Something else took the place of God. They went into a time of unrestraint. God takes those first 2 commandments very seriously. But you wonder, you look at this, and Moses went through the same things and had the same emotions, and he had his up and down days. In fact, God dealt with him for the end of his life for some of his not obeying what God said to do. But you wonder, how does someone face disappointment and difficult times and weariness, and maybe you feel like you're alone or misunderstood, and you've lost the relating, the sense of community that many of us need so much. The heroes in chapter 11 of Hebrews said it this way, and this is how he stayed faithful. It said Moses kept right on going because he kept his eyes on God. Y'all, that's your assignment this week. Moses kept right on going because he kept his eyes on God. Moses kept on going because he kept his eyes on God. That's your job this week. Oh, you might write, oh, this is good, and you might read in your Bible, oh, this is wonderful, but another day is going to come. Another week may pass. Another phone call may happen. We might be tempted to look to something else to fill that thing inside. No other gods was the first one. In the difficult times, remind yourself about Moses. He kept his eyes on God. Can you do that? I want to speak blessing to you. I really hope you'll join us this week. Well, it's okay. It's safe. Come on. Everything's fine. And we worship and we sing. And when they tell us we can't sing, rules will change. We're going to keep singing. We're not going to lose our song. I told people since this started, don't lose your song. I have to admit, maybe I wasn't quite spectacular through all of it at times. But I believe it more than ever. We'll talk about that more in the days ahead. But in the meantime, the Lord bless you. The Lord keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you. The Lord be gracious to you and grant you peace. Keep your eyes on God. That's your assignment. See you next time.